Thanks, Paul. Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Just a couple of last things coming up here on the screen that we can move on with. Welcome aboard, everybody, for the, as Pete said, the third of a series of 11. Now, today's topic, of course, is title is called Get the Clients You Really Want. Now, what's that mean? Well, fundamentally, predominantly that means that we're going to be talking about this little beast called marketing. But I want to be more specific around the term, because marketing is and I'm sure everybody on board, and I see the names of people on our webinar today, and I recognise quite a few. And I know that those that I can recognise have a reasonable amount of experience in business, and so I want to make a statement, I suppose, straight up front, and that is that whilst marketing is everything, we won't be talking about every part of it today, because you're talking about products and pricing, and of course your basic 4 Ps, your placement, your distribution outlets. Promotion's the part of that we want to talk about today. So, and last webinar, the number 2, we talked about sales. As you recall, it was called Turning Tire Kickers into Money in the Bank, and that's all about that's about sales. So today our webinar is really about lead generation as a part of marketing, yeah, so just to be clear, I want everybody to start thinking around, how do I attract the clients that I want, and in fact, who are the clients that I want? What makes for a client of yours that you sort of say, okay, these are the clients I want? Really important to start to think about lead generation in terms of what you want, not just in terms of putting stuff out there and seeing what you get. It's a bit like fishing with the right bait in the right pond with the right rod and all the rest of it. The chances are that you'll catch the fish that you're fishing for. If you don't know much about fishing, I guess you're perhaps like me, who doesn't know anything about fishing, and as is evidenced by my efforts over Easter, I was struggling. I couldn't catch a fish in a trout pond, and they're all captive. So that's a little bit about my fishing skills. But the bottom line is, if you don't know what you're fishing for, I mean, you're not using the right tools, you're not using the right bait, you might catch something, but it may not actually be what you're after. So again, welcome aboard. That's what we're going to be talking about today, and I see we've got quite a few on board. I wonder if you could do me a favour, everybody, and just simply in your top right hand corner, if you've been on before, you'll be quite used to this, or if you've used GoToWebinar before, you'll be quite used to this. You'll probably find somewhere in your screen there that you're able to type a few things in, and I guess if I may ask you to perhaps just type in where you're from. Number 1, it tells me a little bit about those those areas where people are coming from. And number 2, it shows me that there's actually somebody listening and that microphone's working, all the rest of it. So there we go. Fantastic. Thank you very much. That means that we must be predominantly going we must be getting out there anyway. I see that, and that's fantastic. Thanks very much, everybody that's typed in. Good to see where people are actually from. For those that I don't know, and there's quite a few on the webinar today. Fantastic. Thanks very much. Okay, so let's talk about what marketing is, or in fact what we're going to talk about, that part of it, promoting, is. I'm going to propose that something that'll come up on you. It should come up on your screen pretty much right now, and I believe that your good promoting, good marketing, if you like, is getting people who have a specific need or problem, which you provide a solution for, obviously, to know, like, and trust you. That's really what it's all about. Now, you've got to start, you've got to initiate conversation. Of course, they're going to need to have some to build a ring, or you're going to need to build a relationship with them to enable you to actually, or to enable them to like and trust you. So the first part of it, of course, is it starts out with people knowing you, which is knowing about you, knowing who you are, knowing that you exist. And very often I find that, a lot of people sort of say, well, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put myself out there. I want, not enough people know I exist and know who I am. And so that becomes the first part of the exercise, doesn't it, to know. And then through your sales process and skills in that area, to like and trust. And sometimes that comes with even having a transaction or having several transactions before they'll actually fully trust. And all of this depends a little bit too on the what you're selling, the size of the sale and all the rest of it. I don't see anybody there that's probably in the $2 shop market. So, to go out and spend some money that is almost, doesn't matter, doesn't require the same levels. But I'm looking at the sorts of people that are on our call today, webinar today, and seeing that, for the most part, you're in the businesses that will require like and trust to go alongside you to enable a sale. So let's talk about what we've got to do in that regard to do that. But I think it's important to look at this too, to look at the whole sentence and understand that people who don't have a need for your services or your product or service, they don't have a specific need or problem which you provide a solution for. It doesn't matter that they don't know you. And I think it's really important, it's not important for everybody to know you. It's only important for those people to know who you are that are looking for or have a need for have a problem which you solve. So let's actually be clear about that, and let's start to understand what is it that I solve. What is my solution? Solution to what problem? Who's got the problem? So we start to understand exactly what we've got to actually achieve in terms of a marketing. Okay, so moving along. Okay, let's define, and we've already spoken about it, but let's actually do one more definition and suggest that what's marketing and what's sales. Well, my belief is that lead generation involves the process of generating interest in you and your service, and that's predominantly what we're going to be talking about today, how to generate interest in you and your service. And the second part of that, of course, is sales is the process of converting that interest into a transaction. If you weren't on my webinar 4 weeks or so ago, you'll have potentially missed the sales part, which obviously comes after the interest part. But I will say, if you want to go to our website, businessreeducation.com.au, you'll find a downloadable version of our last webinar, so you can grab that in terms of sales. So we'll get back onto the one that we want to talk about today, which is this guy, lead generation and the process of generating interest. Okay, moving through that one. Okay, so can I ask everybody that's on the line, potentially, what sort of challenges have you found in terms of lead generation? What are you experiencing, or what have you experienced, or what do you know of experience of even others around lead generation? And what I guess if you look at the picture, you'll see, I'm suggesting something's not working. It's not working because you potentially, or they're potentially doing it wrong. So what's just some of the experiences, very short, very couple of words, ineffective, wrong markets, or wrong people responding, or nobody's responding, or certain channels that aren't working. Let me have a look and see whether you've got any feedback for us that regard. Just again, just a bit of a typing exercise for everybody. Pardon me. Let's have a look and see anybody got some feedback for us. Okay, thank you. Very good. Yeah, scattergun approach ineffective. Definitely, we'll definitely be talking about that. Unsure what channels work for my particular service. Procrastinating about putting yourself out there, which is an interesting bit of self-realization, I guess. That's an issue, isn't it? That's probably an individual one, and you know, a very interesting one too. So thanks for that feedback. Perhaps sometimes the clients are the wrong ones. I'm seeing that a little bit. You know, that you're attracting the wrong you're attracting the wrong interest, the interest from the wrong people. Advertising, which is ineffective in certain channels. Now that's an interesting one too, which we'll talk about when we get to the channel selection, I suppose, and how to get the message out there. I'd suggest that, and that's a really good point. I'd suggest that, you know, there are certain channels that work well for some industries and not so well for others. But if you're finding, generally speaking, that you're trying all sorts of channels being, you know, direct marketing, television, radio, newsprint, magazine, skywriting, balloons over Bendigo, whatever it might be, that in fact it may not be the channel that's wrong, it may be an ineffective message. It may be that the message isn't necessarily hitting the mark. So we need both an effective message, but one that's an effective for the target that you're going for. Now, my experience would suggest that if there's one thing that's quite common, is that the lead generation isn't targeted at all. So it's a case of saying, okay, I'm putting it out there, but I don't actually know who I'm putting it out there for. And that's going to be one of our big deals, if you like, in this webinar. Thanks for your feedback. That's terrific. Some of the things that I've seen in terms of ineffective, and see whether these resonate. Low number of leads, or a poor quality of lead. So there's a difference, isn't there, between the number and the quality. Now, how do you ultimately determine the quality of a lead? Well, the quality of the lead is, number one, they go through to purchase, and number two, that they, I guess, have longevity with you, and that they become well, let's call them an A-class client. So ineffective in terms of those. Non-strategic, which means that there's no real connection with your lead generation, the lead generation that you're doing, with longer-term outcomes. So you're potentially not necessarily looking at campaigns that create that build towards a longer term, and you're necessarily thinking the longer term. Sometimes they're, dare I say, reactionary. So that's another challenge that I've certainly seen. And people sort of say too expensive. Well, I guess too expensive is all a function of how much you get in return. So I'd suggest it's all about return on investment. These are just expressions that have been used. Too expensive, not aligned to specific budget, so they've been purchased not to a budget, but in fact, you know, potentially on a potential opportunity. But I think too expensive, when people sort of say advertising or lead generation is too expensive, I think it's more expensive not to do it, to be quite honest. But I also think that it's based on return on investment, in simply that. If I was to sort of say I could spend $100,000 on lead generation, with $100,000 turned into $1 million, every time you had $100,000, I'm sure that you'd spend it. So there's one's around not enough insufficient value, and the other one could be simply don't have $100,000. In that case, too expensive would be a valid point. So what for most small businesses anyway, have to look at methods that actually are suited to their size and their outcomes. And certainly some of those channels can be literally too expensive. you don't have the money. And I think the other thing that I guess I can bring to bear here and report is that just because you see people spending a lot of money on advertising doesn't necessarily mean it's working. So don't fall into the trap of saying, oh well, that's the answer. I've worked with so many businesses that have spent so much money on advertising that doesn't work or that didn't work. So don't fall into the trap of assuming that because other people are doing it, it must be working. I can pretty much tell you that in a lot of cases it's actually, pardon me, it's not. So that's either reassuring or demoralising, one of the two. But let's move on. Okay, so let's first of all think about this, because it leads into this how much do I spend, or where do I go, how do I do lead generation that is cost effective and gives me a good return on investment. Well, there's a couple of things you need to actually understand in terms of lead generation from a financial point of view. And we have two aspects that you have to consider. One is the acquisition cost, which is how much does it cost me to acquire that client the first time, or which is what acquisition is, isn't it? So how much does it cost me to acquire the client? Now, something you have to come to terms with is it's always going to cost you something. If you think you're going to get clients for nothing, then you're probably, dare I say, well and truly kidding yourself. You have to put in, there has to be a spend of some sort. Now that's typically either money or time. There has to, or let's call it effort. I guess we've all heard, nothing comes from nothing. So expecting leads to self-generate, just, if I build it, they will come, field of dreams philosophy, sadly, doesn't work all that well. So if you're sort of hoping that you acquire leads by doing nothing, then I guess you have to really shake your head and go, well, I'm not sure what I was thinking there. Makes sense? So acquisition cost, how much does it cost me to buy a client, a customer? Okay. The second part of this needs to be lifetime value. Clearly, lifetime value and acquisition cost have to be considered together. Okay. So we're talking about the value to you as a business owner of the clients that you bring in. Now, it would seem pretty obvious, but I'll state it anyway, that the balance between the two is important, and that the acquisition cost is very much also dependent on the lifetime value. If a client is going to spend $20,000 with you over their lifetime of being a client, then it changes the nature of what you might consider to be a reasonable acquisition cost. Make sense? So what that means is if they're going to spend $20,000, would it be reasonable to spend $2,000? Would it be certainly reasonable to spend $200 to acquire that client? Now, if the lifetime value of the client was in fact $500, it changes the nature of the whole equation in terms of what's the allowable spend. So there's some maths to be done here, sadly. You need to actually sit down and look at your history, and hopefully looking at the people that are on board that I know of, they'll have history, and understand what is the lifetime value typically of a client, and what is the varying lifetime values of different clients, meaning how much have they spent with me over their lifetime as a client with you. And the other thing is tracking your acquisition cost. Now, lifetime value is not terribly hard to track, because anybody that's got, I guess, digital bookkeeping can simply look up a client and go, okay, tell me how much they've spent over the last 10 years or 5 years or 3 years or 2 years or 1 year. What you might not be tracking, and I'd suggest that you should, is acquisition cost. And let's have a look and see what that means. So acquisition cost is the initial cost of purchasing the client. I guess that's fair. Here's an example that I put up, and you can follow this clearly on the thing. So whatever I've done, I've created a campaign that we'll talk about how to create a campaign. That's what this is all about. And it's cost me $1,000. I've spent $1,000. Let's just call it a radio ad for 2 weeks. And it's cost me $1,000. Now, from the $1,000 or from directly as a result of that, I've actually generated 10 leads. So cost per lead, which is a CPL, cost per lead is a marketing metric. Sorry, cost per lead is clearly $100. 10 divided by 1,000. Number of clients, 2 out of the 10. So my conversion rate would be 20%. So 2 of the 10 have become actual clients. So my acquisition cost there is $500. Now, you might sort of say, depending, of course, on your business, you might sort of say $500 I'd spend, every day of the week. If I can get a client for $500, that's a good spend. Other people listening in would sort of say, wow, $500 seems a lot for me to spend. Fair to say, it depends on your product, depends on it depends on a lot of things. The initial spend of these 2 clients was $200, their initial spend. Now, assuming that there was a cost to deliver that as well, then you might sort of say in the overall scheme of things, looking at that just straight out, you'd sort of say, wow, that was a really bad lead generation strategy. And of course, on those numbers, absolutely it is. But so what have you got to do? Number one, you've got to actually record the spend that you've campaign. Whenever you do a campaign, you need to at least track these numbers. What did I spend on it? How many leads did it generate? How many clients came from those leads? And then, which gives you an acquisition cost. Now, your spend per client has a new effect. The first one is $200, but we've also got to ask the question, if this was a good or poor campaign, was going to depend upon, before I go to it, it will depend upon the lifetime value. But, tracking those numbers aren't difficult. My suggestion straight up is to at least track the numbers. So how many leads did I generate from a campaign? How many clients came from that, from those leads? I now know my cost of campaign, my lead cost per lead, and my acquisition cost. So they're good numbers to know, because what I'm trying to do is reduce my acquisition cost and increase my, next slide, lifetime value. So good business, good marketing is actually marketing which consistently reduces acquisition cost and increases lifetime value. That's where what we're all looking to achieve. And the lifetime value is the value of the client over the lifetime of that client. So easy to track. It's in your bookkeeping. You can track any client you like. You can look and see. And if you actually record where did this client come from, whether you do it in your books, as in your bookkeeping program, it's quite capable of doing that, or whether you use a separate tracker. I call these things a great name by the name of a tracker, but it's usually, in my case, generally a constructed spreadsheet, which will sort of suggest here's the campaign, here's the clients I got from that campaign, here's the leads I got from that campaign, here's how many of those turned into clients, and from there on my bookkeeping program will generally track the spends, if you like, of those clients. So not hard to do. And it's only hard to do if you make it hard to do, and you're not diligent in actually simply recording those things. And of course, knowing that which client came from which campaign, because generally speaking, we've got a number of things happening at the same time. How do you find that out? Well, if you're doing digital marketing, it's a little bit easier to track. If you're doing non-digital marketing, guess what you have to do? You have to set up something that will enable you to measure that campaign or measure that channel. And sometimes that's as simple as ask the question of every new client that comes in or every new lead that comes in. Just ask the question, can I ask how you found out about me? Very simple, and record it. Okay, so if we understand about calculating acquisition costs and calculating lifetime value, you can start to appreciate what the right level of spend needs to be to produce a client. And number two, we can actually start to look at campaigns and suggest that if this campaign, if I've got if I've assumed that a reasonable acquisition cost is $100 and I've spent $1,000 on a campaign, then I would be suggesting that you would be looking to get 10 new customers or clients from that campaign to make it to be able to sort of suggest that it's worthwhile. So you can go both ways. You can spend the money and then say, okay, my expectations, this campaign needs to produce this many clients, or you can look at how many clients you want to you need to generate and look to see what the spend is that might go with that. It all comes from understanding acquisition cost. Hope that makes sense, everyone. Let's move on and say, how do we now build these campaigns? And that's what it really all comes down to. We've got 5 really key ingredients, if you like, in building any lead generation campaign. And the first one, of course, is you have to ask the question, who do you want to attract? This is the most important. This is where every campaign starts. And if you can't answer that question, you know, there's no point going on into the next areas of building a campaign, because if the answer to that is everybody, then unfortunately what that means is nobody. It's virtually impossible to create a lead generation campaign, a single lead generation campaign that will cover, you know, everybody, even if it's all of your demographic. It's just not, it's really not that feasible. Well, it might be, but the spend is enormous for that sort of thing. And I'm guessing most of the people on this webinar don't have enormous lead generation budgets. And even if you did, I would suggest that you need to be diligent in how you spend them. So we'll talk about each of these topics throughout the rest of the webinar. But first of all, you've got to say who. Second, what do you want them to buy? So what is the what is the service or product that you want them to actually purchase? You know, when we talk about specific campaigns, it'll become a little bit more obvious. The third question, third area is where. Where will you find them? And I make the point here, in volume. You know, scattered all over the place is not in volume. It's where will I find the who's, the people you want to attract. Where do I find them? Now that's geographically, demographically, psychographically, and we'll talk about some of those things when we get to number 3 in more detail. Number 4 is why. Why will they be interested in you? And this is one of the big challenges where I see people, businesses that are called advertising doesn't work. It's predominantly, they haven't addressed this issue around why will they be interested? Why will, you've got to appreciate that. I think at last statistic I looked at said that most people are exposed to something like 4,500 marketing exposures per day. You know, yours has got to be pretty special for it to be noticed. Number 1, to be noticed, and number 2, to attract for them to be interested in. I mean, I can notice a billboard, but I might not be interested in its product, or it may have it may not actually do the next part of what it needs to do, which is create a desire. Makes sense? So why we'll talk about further on. And 5th point then is how to get your message to them, which is, of course, the channel. When we talk about marketing channels or advertising channels or promotional channels, that's what we're talking about, this number 5. How will I get the message? What channel will I use? And you can appreciate here that if you're picking the channel first, which is I'm going to try magazine advertising, then effectively that's what you're doing. You're picking the channel first and trying to work backwards. I think for anybody that was at a seminar that I ran, a face-to-face one, part of back in just last month actually. Wow, time flies. In March, and you know, we looked at we talked a little bit about that around, you know, the use of a channel, and sort of saying, well, you know, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried this, and I've tried another form, and none of it worked. I'd suggest the message is the problem, not the channel. So, and that gets us that message will be predominantly why they're interested or not. So, if it's okay, we've got now we've got 5 areas to delve into a little bit further. Okay. So the first area is identifying, in your first job in building any campaign, is to identify who you want to attract. Now, the topic here is called Get the Clients You Really Want. So understand in every campaign or in your business, who do you really want? How do I find out that information? Now, for a business that has existed for anything more than, let's say, 12 months, you can look in your own records and find out. One of the things that I'll do, and I will get you know, virtually clients to do really early, is to have a look and say, okay, do you know who your best customers or clients actually are? Now, you can build a criteria around that. Sometimes it's not just about how much did they spend, what is their profitability. It could also be how easy are they to work with. It might be where are they located. It may be, you know, a whole set of criteria that you use to determine who's an A, who's a B, who's a C, who's a D. Let's talk about the A's though. If you fundamentally, I think that in turn, generally speaking, you want to attract more A-grade clients. So you can look into your database, past and current clients. You can look into your database and go, okay, I can pull that database out, particularly out of digital bookkeeping, and simply run a report that I can show spends of clients over the last, you know, 2-year period, 1-year period, or whatever, and get a pretty good feel for who my best clients actually are, and start to look at what makes them my best clients. So this is, you know, this is where I'm sort of, I guess, advertising or promoting or marketing for more clients. Let's call it generally speaking, rather than a particular, potentially a short-term campaign or a sale, if you like, or similar types of an approach. So, you know, I can mine you can mine your client base and start to have a look and identify who your best clients actually are. And I use this very often, Mr. Pareto. Mr. Pareto is the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule. Now, understand which 20% of your clients produce 80% of your profitability. At least appreciate which 20% constitute 80% of your sales. And now, Mr. Pareto wasn't perfect. When he says 80-20, it doesn't mean that he nails exactly 80% to 20% every time, but understand that it's always about the significant few that have the major effect on your business. And that will be the 20%. Mr. Pareto was pretty clever. I'm not sure that he necessarily realised exactly how far the Pareto principle would in fact stretch, but it's the 20% of your client base that produces 80% of your sales or profitability. It's the 20% of your client base. Oh, sorry, the 20% of your client base that produces 80% of your problems or your heartaches. They're usually the D-type people. That you know, if you want to extend it to a party, you'll probably find that you know, which 20% of the guests drink 80% of the available alcohol. It's Mr. Pareto was very, very clever, and I'm not sure he necessarily thought it would apply to all of those things, but it's incredible how it does. So this is a really useful thing to actually look at and say, how do I know who my best clients are? Go back through your history, do a 80-20 on your client base, and find out who the 20% that are the most important 20% actually are. And here's what to do next. Identify what makes them, what links those people, those clients. Is it about what they tend to buy? Is it about where they are? Is it about who they are? Is it about the way they think? What's the commonality between that 20%? That's your A-class clients. And if you're going to promote, let's say, and I use this term a little bit sparingly, generally, then you're after those, you're after more of those. Why would you want to attract more D-class clients? Certainly you want to attract A-class clients. Now, if it's a particular campaign that you're running, then it might be about identifying who is your primary market for this particular campaign. I'm suggesting in any lead generation that you're better to be narrow rather than broad. This is something that's changed a lot in the last 10 years probably. Most people didn't realise it until about the last 3 or 4, but it's probably realistically it's changed over the last 10, is that the world is becoming more niched rather than more back to specialists rather than generalists. And I mean, the rationale for that is predominantly because of digital marketing and because of digital products. It means that we can actually expand and attract a global audience. We've become, you know, not so much village based anymore. We're in a lot of cases global, or certainly an extended market. So even in terms of this webinar, as an example, I mean, I don't recognise any of the names from that are from another country, but they could well be. So, you know, the opportunity to deliver a product more globally is now available to most people. And so, what that means is if the market is large, then the topic can be quite small. So it means that we're better off to try to narrow our marketing to be more specific than it is to sort of go, well, generally I'm just, you know, I'm blasting this out to everybody. I think that there was mention back in the previous inputs by people that sort of said that, let's call it the scattergun approach. And then we're trying to really be smarter than that, I guess, and not utilise that scattergun approach, because at the end of the day, you're paying for all of the bullets. You might as well get as many of them you want as many of them to hit. If you're paying for 100 bullets, it's good if you hit 100 targets. Otherwise, if you only hit one it takes 100 bullets to hit one target, that's expensive shooting, I should imagine, I would suggest. So hopefully that makes sense. Is it got to be very specific around who you want to attract in any campaign or any lead generation campaign. So the second topic here is, the second thing we have to understand is, what do you want them to buy? So be specific again around what is the product or service or narrow band of services that you're actually looking for that group to buy. Again, everything, you know, or my whole range, the message will get lost. If you look at, I'll take that off the screen so it's not distracting, if you look at some of the major advertising advertisers in the world, and you've only got to sit there and watch television for long enough and you'll soon see which ones spend, you know, quite a deal. But even if you look at someone like, dare I say, McDonald's doesn't ever market its brand. It markets a product. It sells something. Whenever you see an ad, it will be for a particular product. I just, one comes to mind as something to do with some spicy hamburger at the moment or whatever it is, but it's a specific product. They don't go out there and go, you know, we're McDonald's, we sell hamburgers, you should come in someday and buy one. They're actually always leading with a particular product that they're actually wanting to buy, and I make the point that they're often leading with that product. It's either new or they know that it actually leads to the sale of other things. So you've got to look and sort of understand, what do I want them to buy? Is it a product or service leader? Meaning that, you know, what I've found is this is a common thing that people are looking for and it leads to my other services, you know, my more niche-based services, or it may be a good product which covers a reasonable part of the market, and that you know lots of people are interested in. The supermarkets of our that I can think of often use things like milk as their leader, and I think that there's a particular brand that I don't know whether they still do it, that they were selling, you know, milk for $1. Do they make money at milk at $1? Maybe, maybe not. Don't really know. But the reality is, it's a product. It's a leader product. It leads to other sales. What do you want them to buy? You know, a popular item, same sort of thing. Something that's quite popular that that will, you know, get people prospects, a good number of prospects into your sales funnel. Again, if you don't know what I mean by a sales funnel, go and download our last webinar, and you will. It may be in terms of a competitive response. So not going through all of these, but competitive response might be somebody's, one of your competitors is actually promoting something in particular, and you're looking to provide a response to that, a competitive response by if you like, leading with a similar or you know, in your case a better, I'm sure in everybody's case a better product than your competitor. A high repeat service means that, you know, once people buy this, then they've actually it's a product which requires, or which tends to lead to you know, high repeats. Could be stock run out. You get the idea here. High margin product, seasonal item, sale item. So it's actually, or service in all of these cases, it's actually saying I've got to be quite specific about what I want them to actually buy, and not simply, and this is where, you know, dare I say, brand, and using the term loosely, brand advertising or brand marketing is relatively ineffective, guys. You know, the theory of that says, oh, well, you know, you never know when somebody's going to need what you sell, and so you've got to keep promoting yourself and telling them that you do it, you do it, you do it. You know, unfortunately, our market, our client base is smarter than that now. They don't retain that information. They work on not a information retention, but in fact I'll look for it when I need it. So, you know, they don't tend to store those things in their memory. When it comes to a time where they're looking for a particular product or service to provide a solution to, you know, a problem that they have, then they will look for it. So you can waste a lot of money by this sort of, let's just keep running it out there for years and years and years, and waiting for varying people to actually want what we do. That's an expensive way to go about it. So lead with something that you know that they want. Okay, what's next? Well, our next area is, where are they in volume? So if I've identified what I want to sell, and I identify my primary market, that means what's the largest group that I can think of that would be appropriate for that particular product. Then I've got to ask the question, where will I find them? And that doesn't necessarily mean, as I put in the picture, that doesn't mean they're all standing around in a big pack, but in fact they might be. Might it be at an exhibition? Might it be at a you know, a home show, for instance, is where you might find a lot of people if your product is to do with the home. So it makes sense that you sort of say, okay, well, where do I find them? But also it means some of these other things, which is, look, where do they congregate in terms of, where do they group? So, you know, do they centre around something? Are they all part of, or not all, but is there a large number of people that might be, you know, in a certain network? Now, those networks can be both offline and, of course, now very much online. You know, are they already connected to other businesses? Fair to say, it would mean that those businesses were non-competing of yours. You know, yeah, fine, if you sell furniture, they're all a part of some other furniture company's database, but it's unlikely that you can go along and actually utilise that. But if the business is not competing, for instance, if you appreciate that your client base, you sell a home product that is actually aligned to potentially a brand of car, then you're starting to actually sort of go, okay, well, where I'll find those people is in somebody else's database. This is one of the most effective lead generation strategies that you can use, is to sort of go, why aren't I actually talking to other businesses with the same, in the same space? Alliance partners, to differentiate between host beneficiaries, alliance partners are ones whereby you can go back and forwards, over a long period of time. It might be a hairdresser and a tanning studio, for example, that can actually share clients. They can come into one and they can be cross over to another. A host beneficiary is where you fundamentally utilise your host business pretty much once. So you can go to so if I use that same example between a hairdresser and a tanning salon, if I was the tanning salon, I could go to the hairdresser and go, hey, if I was to offer your client base a really great deal on tanning, because they're a valued client of yours, would you send out my offer? Now, why would they do that? Well, it looks pretty good from their point of view, being it's sort of saying, as a valued client of ours, we've found this, because you've got to have a level of like and trust, of course, but here's how we could send something out to our client base. Now, you might think, oh, that's information sharing. No, I'm not suggesting you information share. I'm not suggesting you give somebody a database, but I am suggesting that you can, on their behalf, you can communicate with your database and tell them of a great offer that you've coordinated. Now, the reality is that the offerer has probably coordinated it, but your business is going to look good. So, connecting with other businesses that already exist that deal in the same people, that's where those people might also be. Of course, things like trade associations or networking, buying groups or whatever are another area. Referrals sounds obvious. Maybe it's not obvious until I put up the word. But the best people the best way to find A-grade clients, more A-grade clients, is actually by getting referrals from existing A-grade clients. So are you identifying the who as being, this is my who, where will I find them? They tend to hang around together, guys. They tend to be, friends and of each other. So, that's where you can really utilise referrals and find that, that's where I will find them. I will find them as clustered around my existing clients. Of course, media audiences, now, where are they? What we need to do here is we need to be quite specific around the media audience. Dare I say, things like run of station aren't useful. What you really need to do now is think about, audiences for shows, not for stations. When the clever people invented the remote control, it predominantly watered down the buying or the selling effect of any particular station. You need to sort of go, okay, that's where you can get the demographics of at least of the audiences. What type of people are watching, these various shows. So again, it's clustered around. They're clustered around something. And that's the answer to the where. Geographics in a certain area. It could be, Castlemaine, or it could be Echuca, or it could be Bendigo. But even in Bendigo, I think it's needs to be a little bit more specific than that. And of course, where are they? They're already sitting in directories. If your business is, particularly if your business is business to business, then directories are simple. I mean, if your business is business to business, and you've identified that you want to get in touch with a particular trade, I dare say that those trades are already advertising back out. They're easy to find. they want you to find them. So, pardon me. So all of these are some of the areas that you'll actually find the answer to the where are they in volume. Let's talk about the next one, which is why will they respond? And this is really the key, the messaging that you've got to consider here. Why will they respond? We need them to take action. Think Superman. We need them to actually, jump out the window and do something as a consequence of your call. So why will they respond? Well, there's got to be something. There's got to be a rationale. There's got to be a reason. And let's look at some of these areas that they respond to. If you're not telling people how you're different, then you're not really telling them anything at all. It's to tell them what you do is really pretty ordinary, to be honest. I'll give you the example where I'm seeing a plumber that's probably telling me that he or she is a plumber that does plumbing things. Well, it's not really. It doesn't tell me how they do it. So, how do you do things that will? That's predominantly got to be your message. That's one of the messaging. The second one can be, a guarantee. And think about, I guess companies that have the use of effective marketing strategy companies, and you'll find that these things always exist. Will they respond to the guarantee? Is another thing. Are you able to put out a guarantee? Can you guarantee the difference? So if you sort of say, here's how we do it differently, and we guarantee that difference, then you start to take away people's inherent mistrust, I suppose we'll call it something like that. A high value offer. So, you've got to put something out there. A high value offer, what are we talking about there? We currently got these, and, if you buy that, you get 2 of them, or if you buy that, you get this comes with it. These sorts of things. A timed offer is something that's actually says, do it now, or the offer will go away. I think that there's a car manufacturer, a car brand at the moment that does things like a run-out sale, or I think it's called a plate sale. What it says is, we've got so many of them, once they're gone, they're gone. We will see an offer that's a good offer, but it's only available for the next week or 3 days or 1 day. That's the sort of stuff that we're talking about that will get a response. So if you're not asking for a response in any way, shape or form, unlikely that you'll actually get one. Of course, an exclusive offer, these sorts of things are the types of things that we're talking about. Impending scarcity means that, I guess the car example is an example of an impending scarcity. Once they're gone, they're gone. So it might be that, you've got a particular offer for the first 3 clients, for the first three people that take up. That take it. There's only 3 available. Once they're gone, they're gone. So you've got to have something in there that's actually gives people a reason to respond, and respond now. So think about that one. And of course, then finally, we're talking about how you'll let them know. Now, pardon me. This is the channel. This is where you need to really start to think about what is the most logical outcome of those first 4 steps. If we determine who, what we want them to buy, where they're clustered, why, giving them a reason, or the message, or the fundamental message of why I'm promoting in the first place. Now it seems you'll find that there's almost a natural conclusion to that that determines where you'll put the message. So how means how will I get the message, number 4, to the people, number 1. Simple as that. How will I get that message to those people? And the answer lies in where are they clustered, number 3. Hopefully that makes sense. So the sorts of things that we're talking about in how is, of course, direct mail or direct phone. There are things like representation, direct representation. I mean, if you're talking about trying to get in touch with a small group, or to be honest, around to even a large group that you know where they are, then I'm not sure why people are potentially saying, well, my way to do that is to advertise in the magazine and hopefully they'll read it. If you actually know their name and address, phone, mail, door knock, whatever it might be, could be your best methodology. For most people listening, I'm sure they think, well, that's scary. Maybe, but it's still your best option. This is where, is social media. Can social media work for you here? Remembering, of course, that social media is simply that. Social media is something that actually isn't about selling. It is about know, like and trust. That's where social media works, or where it works best. Media generally, so television, radio, newspaper, magazine. Think about print media. Think about traditional media. This is, but also, you've got other. When I go back to social media, you might be also thinking about certainly beyond Facebook, if that's all you're thinking. You've got various. You've got a pretty widespread of social media opportunities, depending on what campaign you've developed. So media is an option. An event, you might actually become a part of an event because, again, the first four criteria suggest that an event would be a good place to be. So this is where sponsorship, I think, works pretty well too. Again, these are outcomes of 1 to 4. They're not. You don't buy any of these things first and then wonder how to use them. You buy all of these as a consequence of working through the first 4. And of course, how much you spend depends on acquisition, lifetime value. So they're all very much linked. And of course, how you'll get to them, again, referrers. This is where you can sort of say, if I know the acquisition cost is, I'm prepared to pay, let's say $300 to get a client, then potentially I can offer that $300 as an incentive through a referral. I'm not spending more, and in fact I'm probably finding that I'm getting a much better bang for my buck. Hopefully that sort of all makes sense. Okay, so here's an example that I've put together. There's a bit of reading in here, but this is predominantly how I would go about building a marketing campaign. I would use these simple, at the top. So if we look at the top left-hand side, campaign 1. So I've just sort of picked an example. This is a retailer, and the purpose of the campaign. So it's important that you're very clear about the purpose of the campaign. This campaign, I made it up, to initiate the sale of $30,000 of excess large piece furniture floor stock. So I'm being very specific around what this campaign is all about. And then you can sort of ask the questions, right, who is my primary market? You can appreciate there I've sort of said, okay, demographically, it's more demographically based here. And it's also got a geographical base, and you can see that there's a tie-in with age, gender, income levels, and geography. What am I selling? What do I want to sell? Well, my current floor stock, and I've been quite specific around what it is that I want to sell. Now I'm suggesting is ask the question, where will I find that primary market? Well, I've said in our current database, in the database of local builders, in a relevant section of the newspaper. Which section? Viewers of home furnishing TV. So if I'm going to use, if I'm potentially identifying all of the areas, or as many options as I possibly can. Not to say that I'm going to use all of those options, because some of them might not be economically worthwhile, but I at least can brainstorm all of the areas where I might find that primary target. The fourth theory is there's got to be a reason now. So I'm saying my why is that I'm actually having a floor clearance. I'm probably actually discounting those things, or I'm value adding to them. which means that I'm not just sort of saying, oh, it's 30% off or whatever. Don't get sucked into the sale. You know, everything's got to be a sale trap. It could be around, see, these unique pieces not be replaced, so that's scarcity. Those sorts of things. It might be that I actually add value. You know, all floor stock comes with. You know, it can be free delivery for the lifetime of the sale. Whatever it is, at least I've got a reason to advertise. This is the message that I want people to get. And then finally I can come down to, right, well, how will I actually, how will I get that message out? Again, I've got to brainstorm as many different hows as I possibly can. And then I can start to appreciate what the costs are. And I might not just do one, I might do two, or I might do three. It will depend on my, you know, the budget that I've actually assigned to this campaign based on what I expect to sell. And, you know, I'm looking at a return on investment here. So hopefully that makes sense. That's how I would lay out a campaign. I've done another example on the right-hand side of a plumber looking to sell, you know, who specialises in roofs, for instance. Now, this is one that I've actually done in the past for a client and successfully produced the outcome, but it was very specific. So it wasn't just to tell people that we do roofs. It was the purpose of the campaign to sell 30 replacement roofs on existing domestic houses in Bendigo. So the objective was very clear. And then we can start to actually build a campaign around who are going to be the primary market, what do we want to sell, where will I find these people, prospects, why, what's the message that I want. So predominantly I've got to ask the question, why am I advertising? Why am I sending out a message? What's the message that I want them to get? In this case, I wanted them to get the special offer. If booked and delivered within 2 months, they receive free guttering replacements of every roof over 12,000. That was the message that we wanted to get out there. And how did we get that message to those people? There's some strategies down the bottom. And in this case, as I recall, did all three. The letterbox drop was interesting because it coincided with a personal door knock, and because we were able to actually identify various areas of Bendigo that were more likely rather than less likely, it was relatively when I say relatively simple, it required effort, it required time, and it required money. Without those three things, it wouldn't have got any result whatsoever. So, you know, my advice is that you're going to have to do something. Don't sit back and wait for business to walk in the door. In 25 years of business, business does walk in the door, but boy, if I was reliant on it and that was the only thing I was hoping for, then, I'm not sure I would have made 25 years of business. So it's got to be a case of you've got to create the business. Make sense? I see we're just about out of time. In fact, we're over time, so my apologies. Let me quickly, I've got a couple of opportunities. I guess number one is that based on what we've talked about, we're going to do if you want to build 3 campaigns, the way I've just put up 2 campaigns, if you're interested in actually utilising us to actually help you build 3 campaigns in the same sort of way, working through those 5 areas, then just shoot me an email, paul@businessreeducation.com.au, let me know, and we're doing that at the moment. We'll do that. This is a massively underpriced offer, but for people who have gotten onto this particular webinar, it's just for you. The second one is you can do a one-to-one discovery session. I've talked about these before. That's fundamentally if you want to just sit down and talk about and allow me into your business so that I can uncover a few opportunities. We do that ongoing. We do that for everybody, for anybody, and all the money from that goes to a great cause called Beyond Blue. That's our fundraising effort for that particular cause. So if you like the cause and you need the and you'd appreciate the opportunity to sit down with me for about an hour and a half to 2 hours to unpack your business and find out where the opportunities are, you can do that. A couple of quick ones: online health check. If you just go to actioncoach.com/Paul Henschel, you can do your own online health check, and it'll come back with an assessment of where you are in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So a really good opportunity. And I draw your attention to our next webinar, which is on the 12th of May, which is all really about time management, very simply put, or self-management, I should say. So I know we're out of time, guys. It's appreciate your interest in our webinar. Hope you've got some great value out of the hour. I'm sure that you've probably sat and stared at a desk for an hour. So if you've gotten one piece of gold out of today, please let me know what that piece of gold is if you want to type it in, just your one piece of gold. Really appreciate your feedback. And just in closing, I'll draw your attention to a statement that I picked up a long time ago by a mentor of mine. He doesn't know he's a mentor, but he is. And he says, marketing's the first thing we do, not the last. You need to build remarkability. If you want people to remark, you need to build remarkability. And people have asked, what if the product's boring? Well, you get the chance to decide what you make. If you're entering a competitive field and you want to grow, your best plan is to revisit your starting assumption and make something else, which means don't make boring products. That's from Seth Godin. That's Seth. I appreciate everything that he puts out. As a person of a long period of time in the game of marketing, he'll suggest that for the most part, we've got to create offers, products, services that aren't boring, that aren't the same, that aren't run-of-the-mill. And if they are, then the challenge you've got is to create something that's not boring, that is interesting, that people will respond to. Okay, very finally, if you want to download this and have a look back through it again, go back through it, play it in your own time, pass it on to somebody else if you want, then you'll find, give us a day, 24 hours, and you'll find that this whole session has been recorded and will be popped up onto businessreeducation.com.au site, and you'll find a tab there called webinar recordings. I'll also put up a chart which you can use as a who, what, where, why and when, how, a chart which you can simply download and use as a template if you like to fill in the gaps. Thank you very much for your attendance, for your interest in all of the in all things to do with marketing. Appreciate the comments that are coming through. Thanks for that. Nice to get some feedback, and looking for a bit of feedback about your piece of gold. If you want to pop that in, I'd be really appreciate it. But I know I know we've gone a little bit over time by about 8 minutes. Sorry about that, but I appreciate that you've hung in there for 68 minutes and got some great value out of it. Please register for our next one if you find that time is one of your bigger challenges, which I have to say that's about 95% of the business population seems to be that. So please jump onto the website and register for the next one as soon as you can. We have a limit on these of 100, so we're not up to 100, but we can always get pretty close to it. So jump on as soon as you can, and look forward to perhaps connecting with you again then. Okay, we'll stop the recording. We'll say goodbye, and I wish you all the best with your marketing. Yell out if you need a hand. Bye for now.